Tyler Dunn here at Go Long, and I am very, very, very excited to welcome on my friend, your friend, the great Matt Lombardo of Between the Hash Marks. Matt, we're finally doing it, man. It's taken us this long, but we're joining forces here inside the Substack app to talk some football. You do such a great job talking to people around the NFL, coaches, execs, GMs. Everybody, do yourself a favor. Sign up right now to Matt's Substack. Again, Between the Hash Marks. Does an excellent job. I've known Matt for a while. We've crossed paths. We're just sharing some old war stories from Super Bowls past, Miami, Arizona. But God, Matt, great to have you here. How you been these days?
Hi, man. I'm so pumped to be here. So glad to be talking football with you here on Go Long. And I've told you this off the air. I've told you this in text messages and DMs. I'm such a fan of what you've built at Go Long. I admire your ability to not only have the confidence to bet on yourself, but then deliver some of the most outstanding content out there. Look, you just sat down with Brandon Bean for over an hour after the draft to pick his brain and get insights that people have been on the beat for years, if not decades, weren't able to get. And you let me in on a little secret that you're working on something for the site this week. And I just know that it's going to be one of those stories that drives the narrative. And that's kind of an inspiration for me jumping into the Substack world is I've seen you create the kind of stories that get shared across social media that quote unquote break the internet, that drive the narrative. If I could have one or two stories a year, one or two Monday morning columns that have people talking for a week, 2 weeks at a time, or at least the big story of the day, I'll have felt good about myself. But you should be so proud of what you're building. And, you've come a long way since that Super Bowl in Miami where I was hanging out. I was crashing the party at that South Beach hotel, working for NJ.com. And now we're both here doing our own thing. And it's really exciting.
Too kind, man. Thank you so much for saying that, man. I mean, really, it's awesome when you can just run your own thing. I'm sure you're experiencing it yourself with your Substack. You take all the hours that go into it, all the stress, whatever pours into trying to build something with your own bare hands is 100% worth it. So thanks so much. It's like I'm talking to everybody right here in Orchard Park, New York, because I'm working on this story, and I had to cut away, hole up at a Starbucks and try to finish it off. And everybody can check it out next week. I think you're going to love this. Julian Hill for the Miami Dolphins just has an unbelievable personal story to share. But I'm talking to you from this parking lot because, well, I had to do some writing, and then also Mother's Day is around the corner. So there's Hobby Lobby behind me. Hopefully Gina's not on this call, or my mom. So that's so we're going to work that in. That's why I'm not in studio. But I know the mothers out there can spend all day at Hobby Lobby. So hopefully we'll get it done. Well, I will say, I spent half of my time on this podcast bitching about the potholes in Western New York. And anybody who drives through Orchard Park can relate. If you come to this Barnes & Noble here, it's kind of like the McKinley Mall. Everything's kind of dying inside of it. But there's still some good stuff over there. So Barnes & Noble has a Starbucks. That's where I post up a lot.
That's all you need. You get the good Starbucks going, that's all you need. That's the inspiration. That's the fuel is the Starbucks with a good coffee.
Exactly. Oh yeah, it's solid, and you're surrounded by books, so you have a chance to buy a book that just kind of joins the long list of books that you still haven't read yet. But it's a war zone, Matt. Like, the potholes are insane here. So I give credit to everybody running for mayor now. I saw one of them has commercials just saying he's going to fix the potholes. I mean, that's all you really have to say in Buffalo is I'm going to fix the potholes, and you're probably going to win your race. So good luck to that fellow. Where do you want to start? There's a lot happening. You got a lot of content up at Between the Hash Marks. I know you did something on George Pickens, correct? You talked to folks around the league about the trade that really made news this week. There's a lot of ways to look at this. Let's get your take.
Yeah, my take here is, Ty, that the Dallas Cowboys' longstanding nightmare of trying to find that running mate for CeeDee Lamb comes to an end, and I think comes to an end in a pretty big way. And I spoke to an NFL executive who told me that he believes, quote, Dak Prescott is going to love George Pickens in the deep passing game because it creates, quote unquote, big mismatches. And that's what this is all about, right? You think about the Cowboys offense of a year ago, CeeDee Lamb is a playmaker, but he goes down. Dak Prescott goes down. They don't really have much of a running game. Now you throw a guy opposite him who at his peak averages 17, 18 yards per reception, big play threat, perimeter wide receiver. I know there's the prima donna nature there, right? I know that there's the attitude and all the issues off the field in Pittsburgh that led to him getting dealt, but it just feels like he was playing with Mason Rudolph. He was playing with Justin Fields. He was playing with Russell Wilson, who was leaking oil by the end of a year ago. You put him in that situation with Dak Prescott, who the last time he was healthy led the league in touchdowns. I think George Pickens is going to be motivated and bought in. And if that's the case, I think the Cowboys climb back into the fringes of the conversation in the NFC again.
I love the take. It's bold. It's fresh. And I get all the red flags here. And I'm to be fair, I'm probably still in the other camp because we've seen this from the Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver before where all of the smoke is pretty damn smoky for good reason. There's a lot of fire. I
Yeah.
think that he probably was a pain in the ass to deal with behind the scenes. We because we see the antics, we see what he's doing on the sideline, and it's not pretty, right? We see him quitting on plays here, quitting on plays there, and there's probably some people in that Steelers building thrilled that Pickens isn't around. At the same time, the Dallas Cowboys, for whatever reason, and we've written about this too, they just don't sign veterans. I mean, they draft really damn well. Like their personnel department is solid with Will McClay, their scouts around the country. I think they do a really a level job of identifying talent, drafting that talent. But then when it's time to pay those guys and Jerry and Stephen Jones take over, their timing as businessmen in the NFL is atrocious. They never know when to pay these guys. It's the exact opposite of what you see with Howie Roseman and the Eagles. And we'll get to Howie,
Right.
right? Like if a
And you
player's
look
up
at
for
the
their
Cowboys, I
contract, he's
mean,
done this since
they had
day
to
one. Pay the
overpay for
player.
CeeDee Lamb, had to overpay for Dak Prescott, and now it seems like Pickens is arriving, Ty, wanting to sing for his supper, wanting to play his way into that mega contract. I think he said today that he doesn't want to sign a long-term extension going into this year, which is fascinating. It's a guy betting on himself. But from a Steelers standpoint, Ty, well, let me know what you think of this take because I just can't shake the feeling. And I spoke to a coach about this shortly after the trade went down that when they acquired DK Metcalf, you could have had the opportunity to have two field stretchers, which is what the Eagles have built with A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, to a similar extent, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins in Cincinnati, Justin Jefferson and obviously Jordan Addison in Minnesota. You could have had two, but if you're the Steelers, now it's DK Metcalf, it's Pat Fryermuth, and who? Right? And it just seems like as much as the Cowboys were aggressive in going for it, I can't for the life of me figure out what the plan is in Pittsburgh. It's actually the lead of 4 downs on Monday, if people want to check that out, with some really compelling, borderline explosive quotes from some people inside the league about what the Steelers have done. But Ty, what do you make of what Pittsburgh is doing? Because it seems like on one hand, you're aggressive and go trade for DK Metcalf to set up this great receiver duo for whoever your quarterback is. And then you offload George Pickens because, in part, you can't stand him. And you don't know who the hell your quarterback is going to be. What is happening in Pittsburgh?
Whew. I don't know. They're a franchise on pause for Aaron Rodgers. I suppose what happens next is Alan Lazard signs. You know, they bring
Randall
Randall
Cobb.
Cobb in, right? Maybe Nate Hackett can be like an offensive consultant. David Bakhtiari, offensive line coach. I don't know who else was at the Derby hanging out. Jordy Nelson. Maybe they can find a role for Jordy Nelson. Yeah, I guess they're just at the whims of Aaron Rodgers, and it all depends on it. Nothing else really matters if you don't have the quarterback. The Steelers know this better than anybody. I mean, they won a couple rings with Ben
Yeah.
Roethlisberger. They held on to Ben Roethlisberger a season too long. You could argue 2 seasons too long. They drafted a quarterback in a bad quarterback draft. They didn't really do Kenny Pickett any favors. And yeah, then they talked themselves into Russ Wilson and Justin Fields. I mean, this time last year, those moves were being heralded and praised. Oh my gosh, look at the bang for the buck here. I don't know. You get what you pay for at the quarterback position, and it didn't work out. As good as Russell Wilson did play at times, and Mike Tomlin, right? He was kind of quick to put everybody in their place. Hey, we knew that this was going to work out, and then everything just kind of went south. So, to answer your question, I don't know what the plan is. I think the defense will be good because the defense usually is pretty good. You still have T.J. Watt, even though he seems kind of unhappy. He wants more money. Cam Hayward, by the way, had a fantastic reply on the Bill Belichick, Jordan Hudson stuff. I think it was on X where I don't even want to repeat what he said on North Carolina, kind of denying the report that Jordan Hudson is banned. Cam Hayward, in so many words, said, that Bill wants to have somebody around that he wants to have around. So
Yeah.
Cam Hayward can still play football and still has his fastball on social media. Yeah, but in the division with Joe Burrow and the Bengals, Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, I you need some talent. This right now, you could argue offensively. And I like the DK Metcalf trade. He's talented. I like Pat Fryermuth, but it's about as bad as it's been for Tomlin
Yeah.
in quite some time. Now they'll always be hovering around 500, but I think they could have charted a different quarterback plan this offseason, right? Draft somebody a little earlier. And
Right.
I think
And,
you
and, and, and
just
that's my
kind of
take here.
sell when the Giants are selling. The Giants have a plan to sell right now. I don't know what the Steelers are trying to sell everybody.
Yeah, Mom, I said this on the podcast with our pal and your former colleague Mike Tanier that if you were the Steelers and you're being held hostage by Aaron Rodgers, which I don't, based on what he's done the last year and a half, the last 3 years, going back to the final year in Green Bay, I'm not even sure why you're going down that road with Aaron Rodgers. But if you're being held hostage, hold your nose and deal with Jalen Milroe. Hold your nose and deal with going up to get Jackson Dart like the Giants did. Do something before waiting to draft Will Howard in round 5 or round 6 or whatever it was. Go get a quarterback that you can try to develop this year, that you can appease a DK Metcalf. Maybe you see what you have, and if it blows up on you, okay, you're going to be in a position to go and get Drew Aller or Arch Manning or one of the top quarterbacks in next year's class. But it just feels like a directionless ship at this point, and that really runs counter to what Buffalo is doing. It runs counter to how Howie Roseman and the Eagles are building their franchise. And this is a bad year, Ty, for the Steelers to be in this situation when the Baltimore Ravens just threw all the poker chips in and went and got DeAndre Hopkins and then tripled down on defensive playmakers and had a fantastic draft.
And it pains me to speak of the Steelers in this match because I love everything that Mike Tomlin's done. I love the culture there, and it's the sport the way the sport should be played. I mean, what he sells internally is what every coach should be. And I kind of like their draft, to be honest. I like getting just a big D tackle in the first round, Eric Harmon, who falls in your lap there. Second round pick, that was for DK Metcalf. You get a running back later. But then you look at some of these drafts from the last 4 or 5 years, and at some point that kind of catches up to you with a veteran laden team. Micah Fitzpatrick, throw him in there as well. So is this the year it all kind of catches up to the Steelers? I don't know. I'm not ready to just completely jump off ship on this team, but I don't know what the plan is at quarterback. And on the Dallas Cowboys, with all these red flags that George Pickens has, and they're very, very real, I still think you trade for him and you take a chance because, this is a team that had 3 12-win series in a row without really doing anything in free agency. As one of the longtime execs there told us at Go Long, like for years and years and years, the edict from above is to go bottom feeding that time of year, to completely ignore those first 48 hours of free agency and wait for the bargains, which is fine. But when you're an 11-win team, a 12-win team, a 13-win team at times like they've been, really for most of the last 10, 15 years, you can go spend. You should go spend. You are a player or two away. And the Cowboys just don't do it. They choose not to play ball, which is crazy when you are the richest franchise in all of sports across the globe. I mean, throw all the European soccer teams in there as well. Throw the Golden State. No team makes more money than Jerry Jones' Dallas Cowboys, yet they don't spend money. So, yeah, I mean, George Pickens, he might be a total cancer that ruins everything, but I still think it's a risk worth taking if you're Dallas because this is something you just haven't been doing the last few years. So go for it. right? And
I
this
agree.
is a good draft for them too. I love Booker. I'd like to get
Yeah.
your take on the guard that they picked up. He seems like the kind of mauler that they need in the middle of that offensive line.
Yeah, you think about the Cowboys' offensive line of 2 and 3 years ago when it was right there with Philadelphia as the best offensive line in football. They've kind of tailed off. They lost Biotish to Washington last year, and a couple of made all pros have gone elsewhere the last couple of years. Been a lot of turnover. Booker comes in. He's a mauler. He's somebody that, if regardless of who the running back is, he's going to be the guy who paves the way. It was a pick that I think they needed to prioritize because they haven't really drafted well at that position the last couple of years. They've sat out in free agency. And big picture, Ty, I just look at the NFC going into this year, and it really felt like before this trade, there were four teams that you talk about maybe going and going to the Super Bowl and representing the NFC. The Philadelphia Eagles, the Detroit Lions, the Washington Commanders, the Los Angeles Rams, and then it's kind of everybody else, right? I just don't see the Packers. I think I love what they did at wide receiver. Golden is a huge difference. They kind of sat out free agency after winning it uncharacteristically the year before with Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney, but I don't know that they're ready to break through. The Bears will be better, but I think that they're a year or two away from really being one of those teams you say, okay, I could see them making it to the NFC Championship game. But with a healthy Dak, with an improved offensive line, with two playmakers at wide receiver, why can't the Cowboys be one of those teams that finally wins a playoff game or two and they're back in the conversation? I don't know that anybody's beating Philadelphia, but I think with a healthy Dak and a game-changing weapon, why not?
Because they're the Cowboys, Matt. I can't. The Dallas Cowboys
Absolutely.
are gonna find a way to screw this up because that's what they do. Because Brian shot. I
I
can't get
know.
past.
I know. I know. I mean, you're going to have to win with defense, right? You're going to have to win with Michael Parsons getting 18 sacks or something ridiculous. You're going to have to win with the secondary returning to form when Darrell Brand had, double-digit interceptions a couple of years ago. It's just going to have to be a different formula. But at the same time, I'm more of a believer in Dak than a lot of people, but you got to get over the hump in the postseason. I think that this is one of those moves that was made with the playoffs and the postseason in mind.
I'm just glad that they passed on Derrick Henry last year. You don't want to get caught up in paying a running back like Derrick Henry. Why in the hell would you want to do that if you're the Dallas Cowboys? Bring Zeke in, dust him off, right?
The
I
ghost
like
of
I like
Zeke's past
oil.
production.
Russell Wilson was leaking oil. What in the hell was Ezekiel Elliott doing last year? Like just total spontaneous combustion. Just
The engine
complete.
fell out. The engine bottomed out. That's what happened there.
Yeah, I can't get on Dallas to that, but I like the move. I like the swing. But you're still in there with the Philadelphia Eagles. You're still in there with the Washington Commanders, Jaden Daniels. Like the moves that they made, and I love Dan Quinn, how he's really rebuilt that thing from the inside out. And then you got the New York Giants actually selling a plan. But while we're in the division, before we move off, I know you've done some work on the Philadelphia Eagles. This was just another Howie Roseman master class kind of draft. It is funny though. You win a Super Bowl, and I guess you're entitled to this. The Philadelphia Eagles and Kansas City Chiefs too. They could literally do anything at all, and we'd all just say, "Oh, what they screwed them again." Howie and Andy Reid, like they did it again. I can't believe the league let him get away with this, but it does feel like that when it comes to this GM in Philly.
Yeah, and you just think about it, Ty, no matter what they would have done during the NFL draft, even though you lose a guy like Mekhi Becton in free agency, even though you trade away CJ Gardner Johnson in the offseason, you still think to yourself, looking down the too deep on that roster, and you're like, okay, roll the ball out in September and tell, who's beating this team in the NFC. I mean, you can make a case for the Lions if they're healthy and maybe they go add a veteran pass rusher. You can make a case for Jaden Daniels making the leap now with Debo Samuel in the fold opposite Terry McLaurin, another great now receiver duo. But this is, in my opinion, Ty, the deepest roster in the NFL. And it's done by the fact that of the 22 starters, they drafted 15 of those players. You want to talk about drafting well. You're talking about 2 of the last 3 years. You're picking in the 30s because you went to the Super Bowl. And 15 of 22 starters are homegrown drafted players. Then you sign Saquon Barkley. You get a diamond in the rough in Zach Bond, and then you're able to re-sign him this offseason after he makes a case for Defensive Player of the Year. And oh, by the way, you look at Dallas Goedert, who you not so secretly dangled in trade rumors and speculation leading into the draft. You convince him to take a $4 million pay cut to stay in the fold with one of the most explosive offenses in the league, with an ascending MVP, Super Bowl MVP winning quarterback in Jalen Hurts. And Ty, it just seems like the combination of the roster building, the culture building, and those two things translating into success, two Super Bowl bursts in the last 3 years, two Super Bowl wins in the last 8. There's going to come a time where we're talking about Howie Roseman being the 8th Hall of Famer in the NFL if they win another one or two of these, because, teams don't want to trade with him. He's the envy of a lot of franchises across the NFL. And I just look at what he's done for that franchise and is continuing to do. You said a masterclass. I think he's a mastermind of this generation of general managers.
Perfectly said. And I think he gets the locker room as well. And that's probably the element of these contract negotiations that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. Is you've got 53 guys during the season with 90 players right now. They're all well aware of the business side of the sport. Who's getting paid, when they're getting paid, when am I going to get paid? Why is this player getting paid? Why not that player? And it just seems like Howie Roseman knows to reward his own. If you believe in your own, pay that player. Get it done. Don't screw around, because it's going to be smart financially. That number's only going up. Jalen Hurts, that number, whatever it was, 50 a year, seemed high then. It's only going up. It's going to get to 60. AJ Brown, only going up. Devontae Smith, Lane Johnson before that. All of these players that they lock up right away, they know how they're going to work internally. They know that this is a talented player, a leader. They can win with this. Just don't mess around. Just get done. Reward that player. Even Saquon Barkley, after they win they didn't have to pay him. They didn't have, but everybody saw how he transformed that offense, that team, what he meant to them. Maybe would have broke the rushing record if they played him, and they rested him that last game. I think Brandon Beane in Buffalo, to an extent, is kind of doing the same thing. They paid their own, like an unfelt this offseason. And we'll see if the Greg Rousseaus, the Terrell Bernards, the Christian Benforts, Khalil Shakirs, if they can kind of take that next step. But I just think it's smart GMing to do that, because if you go the Dallas route, if you kind of wait and then say strange things at press conferences, I guess Jerry Jones, he's basically like this old lady. I'm not making this up. As I was driving to this parking lot, Matt, before we hit live here, an old lady in a car. Not to discriminate against old ladies, but because I wish to drive with this kind of confidence one day. She just completely just cut right in front of me. Didn't see me, didn't care. Going 5 miles an hour. Just sure. That's kind of Jerry Jones at press conference. Jerry doesn't give a shit what anybody thinks, what anybody says about him. He's gonna live his life behind the scenes, without much morals. Doesn't really care. Gonna say whatever he wants in pressers. Doesn't really care. So guess we should all aspire to to live, to conduct ourselves like nothing else matters, and we don't care what anybody thinks. But that's the Cowboys. They don't really handle contracts well, and they end up paying way more money than they need to. So yeah, that's why the Eagles are in a good state of affairs. You know what's interesting though is, and we can kind of transition to Buffalo as well with Brandon Beane, and it was fascinating to sit down with him at length. There's so many questions I wish we could have gotten to still. I guess we'll have time over the course of the season here in Orchard Park. But when he noted that when you pay Josh Allen, you can only pay so many players. And he did catch some criticism when it comes to the wide receiver position. We tried to ask him some of those hard questions too, right? You've drafted one wide receiver in the top 100. You've drafted 8 defensive linemen in the top 100 since taking over. That's quite a discrepancy. But he really believes in winning up front. You saw it with Carolina. Hell, you did see it with those Eagles too. But the thing is, the Eagles, they kind of have been able to do all the above. They have drafted and paid D linemen. They've traded for receivers. They've drafted receivers. They paid those players. They paid their quarterback. They paid for a running back. Is it just the Eagles that have been able to pull this off, Matt? Are they the only team that have been able to pay everybody, reward everybody without repercussions, or is like the salary cap a real thing? I guess it comes back to that. Like
Yeah,
when GMs say like Brandon Bean, like I wish we could have everything. I wish we could pay everybody, and then they don't do it. Is to you is there truth to that, or can is there a needle to thread where you can pay all the above if you choose to pay all the above?
Yeah, Ty, that's where I think that you start thinking about fitting Howie Roseman for that gold jacket because they really seem like the exception, right? And I know that it's their core philosophy, and Howie has said this publicly and privately many times that what matters more to them is winning along both lines of scrimmage. That it starts on the defensive line, starts on the offensive line, you build out from there. And you just think about what they do. Okay, Fletcher Cox is getting up there. We're going to go, and Jalen Carter falls into our lap. It might not be a need today, but we're taking Jalen Carter. You look at Nakobe Dean, a player they drafted, might not be, a need today, but we're going to take Jahad Campbell as an insurance policy. You think about, it seems like they always seem to be one step ahead. Jason Kelsey whispers about retirement for 5 years without much seriousness. All of a sudden, he starts to think about retiring. They draft Cam Jurgens, and now you sign Cam Jurgens to his second contract. It just seems like they're one of the more forward-thinking franchises. But as far as Brandon Bean goes, Ty, I wrote last week in my Monday Morning Four Downs column, I thought that they were the franchise that in this NFL draft stuck with their philosophy and then stuck the landing the best. And that was before reading your story and your sit down where he basically said, "Hey, the Chiefs didn't necessarily, other than Xavier Worthy, draft a wide receiver. How many Super Bowls have we won at drafting wide receivers in the past? That when you look at the teams that are winning, they win up front, and you get Maxwell Hairston, who is a corner, long corner, elite ball skills. He's going to match up with those Jamar Chases, Xavier Worthies, DeAndre Hopkins now, the type of wide receivers you're going to need to get through to break through the glass ceiling. TJ Sanders, a run stuffer up the middle who can collapse the pocket and give you that A-gap pressure. And I had a coach tell me that he thought that Dorian Strong was the steal among cornerbacks in the NFL draft throughout a deep class at the position. So you just look at kind of copying the blueprint of what the Eagles do well, winning along the line of scrimmage, prioritizing that early on defense. And then you look at the offense and you think, okay, we have an MVP quarterback. Keon Coleman, we drafted early a year ago. We like what we see from him. We rewarded Khalil Shakir at the top of the depth chart at that position. We feel confident in Josh. We feel confident in the trajectory of these wide receivers. We gave up 32 points in the AFC Championship game. If we're going to go to the Super Bowl, it's either running through Orchard Park, or it's running through Arrowhead, or it's running through Baltimore, or it's running through Cincinnati. And all of those teams, Ty, what do they have in common? Prolific quarterbacks, dynamic wide receivers, and explosive offenses. And they built or are building a defense that they think can go toe to toe with those offenses. And I think that's really what you need to do. They could have gone and drafted the flash player, they could have drafted the wide receiver early. They went and got the kind of players that you build championship rosters around. And I give them a lot of credit for sticking with a philosophy rather than chasing what they felt like they might have needed in the moment.
I think that the type of draft this was dictated, not to get all cliche, sticking to the board, all
Yeah.
that nonsense. It was a strong draft for defensive linemen. And you had a first round talent in Maxwell Hairston to take in the first round. That's also a position of need. I think it did behoove Brandon Bean and the Bills to kind of roll with the tide, roll with the current, so to speak, instead of forcing it here or there. Time will tell. Big picture, if we're going to take it back to the last 8 years, probably should be drafting some wide receivers, guys that can grow with Josh Allen. I think there's a benefit to that matters, in addition to being cost controlled and getting a lot of bang for your buck at that position where that number's just skyrocketing. Josh Allen's the best player in the sport. To get a young player who can grow with him, I think it's important, especially since when they have the effort's been there from Brandon Bean. They have signed a ton of veterans, whether it's training for guys back to Kelvin Benjamin during the season, Amari Cooper last year. They've done, I'm thinking like Jamison Crowder Marquez Valdez-Scantling last year. Like year 1 to year 8, they've been bringing in veterans all the time, and a lot of them don't really pan out. I think there's a benefit to a young player growing with Josh Allen. You do have that in Keon Coleman. So we'll
Right.
see what happens there. But the more I really thought about this, the more I really do love what Brandon Beane did in this draft. And trust me, it is Brandon Beane making that final decision. He has the power there, one Bill's drive, when it comes to these draft days decisions. It's it's a strong draft up front. Your defense can't stop anything in January in these elimination games. Uh, go right through the numbers. They're not pretty. Maybe, we don't overthink it. Get players who can get your defense off the field against the
Right.
Kansas City Chiefs. TJ Sanders, in theory, you put him in on third down. Ed Oliver takes the double team. TJ Sanders has a one-on-one. He has to win that one-on-one. He has to get in Patrick Mahomes' face, at least affect the play to a degree, right? To have that player. Max Harrison. Next time you suffer an injury out there, maybe you don't even suffer an injury. He is your receiver, chasing Xavier Worthy around, chasing Rashee Rice around. This time he sticks with that wide receiver on those crossing routes. It's not Patrick Mahomes looking for number 5, Kyrie Elam, just humiliating a first round
Right.
pick. So these are additions that directly help you in this game against this team. Same thing with Cincinnati. Maybe you see them. Maybe you see Baltimore. Like the the defense wasn't A+ in that Baltimore game in the divisional round either. So
No.
like the defense had its struggles last season, especially when it came to third down and getting after the elite quarterbacks. So if I'm Brandon Beane, I, I get the exasperation to a degree. He's looking at like, man, look, we scored 30 points in 8 straight games. First team in NFL history to run for 30 touchdowns, throw for 30 touchdowns. Like, we think we upgraded with Joshua Palmer, paying him 11 mil
Right.
a year. Curtis Samuel will be healthy. Dalton Kincaid was battling a PCL injury. Keon Coleman wasn't the same player off of his wrist injury. So, a lot of it is trying to sell this. I get it, but I think there's a lot of substance. I think there's a lot of truth to what he's saying. And also, if I can add this too, Matt, like, Jeremy White, obviously it was on WGR where we're being kind of with scorched earth. To Jeremy's defense, he's been talking about defense a lot on
Yeah.
WGR. He does a fantastic job here locally, as a strong following. So I just want to throw that out there for Jeremy. He has been talking about defense. He hasn't been the wide receiver train thing, is popular. Hell, I wrote a story saying this should draft a wide receiver too.
Yeah.
It's more of like a Twitter shtick, but he has been looking at this big picture. All in all, I think the Bills are set up um, for a different outcome in mid-January. We'll see if the coaching can deliver, right? We'll see what
Yeah.
Sean McDermott can do with these new pieces now.
No, I agree, and I think that when you look at the AFC, it's not a lot different than what it has been. I think it's Baltimore, it's Buffalo, it's Kansas City, and I think that there's a real opportunity. I'm not buying into what the Chiefs have done this offseason. I don't think that they've done enough along the offensive line after they were humiliated all through last year and then worse than ever in the Super Bowl. I know that Travis Kelce's getting up near the end, and as long as you have Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, you're going to be in the mix. But it just feels like Baltimore got significantly better defensively, probably with one eye on taking out Kansas City. Buffalo certainly got better, as we've been talking about, with one eye towards taking out Kansas City. And it just seems like the Bills stuck to what they felt they needed to do to survive the gauntlet. And they felt like they have the difference maker in Josh Allen. They felt like the offense has the pieces they need. And as you said, go get the defense that can limit the damage that Patrick Mahomes does in clutch situations. Put yourself in a situation where you're not dependent on Mark Andrews dropping a 2-point conversion in the end zone. Put yourself in a position where it's the final minute and a half of a game and you're pinning your ears back because you're protecting a lead, not because you're trying to just get off the field.
And that Philadelphia Super Bowl, I mean, it just proves to you that Patrick Mahomes does bleed. This Chiefs machine can be broken. I mean, Tampa Bay did the same thing
Yeah.
just 3-4 years prior. So you've seen it on that stage, and that's what Brandon Beane brought up in our conversation. He's like, that game didn't really change anything for me. This is what I believed in. Back to the Carolina days, bringing up 2003 That team that took Tom Brady and the Patriots to the brink with Jake Delhomme at quarterback, they're loaded up front. Julius Peppers, Chris Jenkins, that like Mike Rucker, that group, Brenston Buckner maybe. And then 2015, Cam Newton's the MVP. Who are his receivers? You've got Devin Funches as a rookie. Kelvin Benjamin's on IR.
Yeah.
Jericho Cotchery, not the best crew. And that team led the NFL in scoring. That team had Luke Kuechly, Thomas Davis, a fantastic D line with Quan Short, I think was up there. They had a really deep group. So that's what he believes in. That's the philosophy, and he's going to stick to that philosophy, which is admirable to kind of believe in something there and roll with it. Let's end with this because I know you've got to run. You've got to get your little one at school, and I've got some Mother's Day shopping. Real quick, I want to hear a team that we're not thinking about, we're not talking about, that you think could surprise people, and we'll kind of tease it for our next Substack Live.
Yeah, how about the Denver Broncos? I thought that they arrived a little bit ahead of schedule last year with Bo Nix really playing above his weight as the season went along. I love what they did in the NFL draft. I think Jahdae Barron opposite Patrick Surtain, that has the potential to be really dangerous. You go and get him a running back in round 2. They made some nice free agent signings. The second year of Bo Nix, the second year of Sean Payton in Denver with that partnership. It just feels like I thought the Commanders were ahead of schedule a year ago. That, I said on my podcast, I wrote it, look out for Washington. They could be a team that makes the playoffs and ruins somebody's day in the postseason. I'm starting to get that feel about the Denver Broncos. And I think that if the Chiefs come back down to earth just a little bit, it might be a loss or two within the division to the Broncos that facilitate that taking place.
I love that selection. That could be the best defense in football.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
they really loaded, and I think if getting a corner, it kind of frees up Sertain, right? Like I think that's
Yep.
schematically going to open some things up for that defense. Right there with you on Denver. It's still hard for me to see anybody else in that division. I feel like the Chiefs, they just kind of play possum through September, October, and they're good by December, and they're getting healthier at receiver with Royce coming back. But yeah, keep an eye on Denver. A team I'll throw out. Let's go to the NFC. I spent some time around these guys this week. The Atlanta Falcons.
Ooh.
Sweet Falcons take that bait every year, but I'm taking it again. I'm in on Michael Penix Jr. I'm in on Terry Fontenot going balls out for these pass rushers. Look,
Yes.
the position's been cursed. Do something about it. Jalen Walker falls in your lap. I get it. James Pierce, talk about red flags with George Pickens. Many a red flag when it comes to Pierce, and those scouts detailed all of it to Bob McGinn in his draft series. But if you hit, he's rare. What, 6'4,
Yeah.
255, 4'4 speed. There's going to be some opportunities for him, for Walker, Jesse Bates on the back end. They drafted 2 DBs that were 2 of the best playmakers in college football. I think that the Falcons in a weak division also, and all those elite quarterbacks are over there in the AFC. Michael Penix with some time, with a top 3 back in Bijan Robinson, with the most underrated wide receiver in football in Drake London, with, dare we say, Kyle Pitts. We've been waiting for the
This might
breakout
be the
for a
year.
while.
It might be the Pitts breakout.
Could be the breakout this year. And all you have is the best offensive guard in football, and Chris Lindstrom. So we'll get into it more in depth soon. But I just want to, let's just
I'm
drop
in on
that.
Atlanta too. I'm in on Atlanta too. We're running a series of between the hash marks. We're grading every team's offseason between now and training camp. Gave Atlanta a B plus for a lot of the reasons you talked about. I know it was a lot to go and get James Pierce, but they've been searching for pass rushers for 2+ years in Atlanta. They found 2 homegrown talents, and as I wrote it in the column, they didn't just, hand the keys to Raheem Morris. They parked a Ferrari in his driveway and they said, go. They said, floor it. We've given you the pieces defensively. Now go do your thing. And I'm with you. I don't know that Atlanta is going to be a team that makes a deep playoff run, but look out, man. They're going to make strides, and they're right there with Tampa in that division, in my opinion.
Yeah, go back and watch Penix. I know it's only 3 games. I get it, 3 games. But it was impressive, man. Like he makes tough throws in tight windows, brings an element of just moxie, confidence. Look, and he did this at Washington. I mean, he helped put that program on the map. I'll never forget this conversation with this West Coast scout who watched Penix closely. His team had a quarterback. They weren't really in the market for Penix, but he kind of convinced me a couple days before that draft. He's like, the narrative around this quarterback is all wrong. Those receivers aren't making him look good. He's making those receivers look good. And I think over time, we might kind of see that play out in the NFL. Uh, Matt, this was fantastic. Our Substack Live debut with Matt Lombardo Between the Hash Marks. Do yourself a favor, sign up, subscribe, read what he has to deliver. He's talking to people all throughout the NFL. Thanks so much for joining us, man.
Hi, thanks for having me, man. It was great. Look forward to doing it again further up the road.
Sounds good. And hey, thanks so much to everybody for watching us here on the Substack Live. If you're listening or watching after the fact, be sure to download the Substack app, turn those notifications on so you can join all these impromptu live videos. Thanks so much, everyone.